17 Black beauty queens who made pageant history and shocked the world. For decades, the world's biggest beauty pageants followed a narrow idea of who deserved the crown until these women changed everything. From historic firsts to victories that sparked controversy worldwide, these 17 Black beauty queens left moments pageant fans still remember. Subscribe to Black Legends Revealed because some of these stories go far beyond beauty. Janelle Commissiong. Janelle Commissiong entered the 1977 Miss Universe competition as Miss Trinidad and Tobago, but by the end of the night, she had become part of pageant history. At 24 years old, she was crowned Miss Universe in Santo Domingo, becoming the first Black woman ever to win the title. Her victory carried unusual weight for the era. Miss Universe had been held since 1952, yet no Black contestant had previously taken the crown. Commissiong was competing at a time when international beauty standards were still heavily shaped by Eurocentric ideals. She also won the Miss Photogenic Award, showing that she had already made a strong impression before the final result was announced. What must it have felt like for Black girls watching in 1977 to finally see someone who looked like them wearing the Miss Universe crown? Commissiong's reign quickly became about more than photographs, gowns, and public appearances. She spoke publicly about racial equality, Black rights, and world peace while traveling as Miss Universe. When she returned home, Trinidad and Tobago celebrated her as a national figure. She later received the Trinity Cross, which was then the country's highest national honor, and her image appeared on Trinidad and Tobago postage stamps. Her achievement continued to be recognized long after 1977. 40 years later, in 2017, a street in Port of Spain was renamed Queen Janelle Commissiong Street. For Commissiong, the crown represented a personal victory. For pageant history, however, that moment opened a door that had remained closed for decades. Jennifer Hosten. Jennifer Hosten was only 23 when she arrived in London, representing the tiny Caribbean nation of Grenada at Miss World 1970. She had worked in broadcasting and as a flight attendant, but nothing in her life had prepared her for what happened on November 20th at the Royal Albert Hall. That night, before an enormous international television audience, Hosten became the first Black woman ever crowned Miss World and the first contestant from Grenada to win the title. The contest itself was already chaotic. Anti-apartheid criticism surrounded the decision to admit two contestants from South Africa, one white and one Black, while members of the women's liberation movement disrupted the live show, heckling Bob Hope and throwing flower bombs. Amid that turmoil, Hosten advanced through a field of 58 contestants and took the crown, while Black South African contestant Pearl Jansen finished as first runner-up. Can you imagine becoming the first Black woman to win the world's biggest beauty pageant while protests are exploding around the stage and millions are watching? Her victory immediately produced another controversy. Grenada's Prime Minister Kaliegh Garris had served on the judging panel, prompting accusations that Hosten had received favorable treatment. Organizers later displayed the judges' scorecards in an effort to defend the result. Hosten herself refused to let the accusations erase what the victory meant. Her story did not end with a crown. Hosten later studied political science and international relations and entered diplomatic service, eventually representing Grenada as High Commissioner to Canada. In 1970, however, one image traveled around the world: a young Black woman from Grenada sitting beneath the Miss World crown in a competition where no Black contestant had ever occupied that position before. Vanessa Williams. Vanessa Williams was only 20 when she walked onto the Miss America stage carrying the title of Miss New York. On September 17, 1983, she left Atlantic City as Miss America 1984, the first Black woman ever to win the crown in the pageant's more than six-decade history. It was a breakthrough watched across America, but her reign would become just as famous for the way it ended. Less than a year later, Williams learned that Penthouse planned to publish nude photographs taken before she entered the pageant. Williams maintained that the images had not been intended for public release. With national attention exploding around the photographs, Miss America officials pressured her to give up the title. Imagine breaking one of America's biggest racial barriers at 20 years old, then being told months later that you had to surrender the crown. What would you have done? On July 23, 1984, Williams appeared before reporters and announced her resignation. She became not only the first Black Miss America, but also the first winner in the competition's history to relinquish the title. First runner-up Suzette Charles subsequently completed the remaining weeks of the reign. What happened afterward made the story even more remarkable. Williams rebuilt her career through music, acting, and Broadway rather than disappearing after the scandal. Then in 2015, she returned to the Miss America stage as head judge. During the broadcast organization, CEO Sam Haskell publicly apologized to Williams and her mother for how she had been treated in 1984. 3 decades after being pushed away from the crown, Vanessa Williams returned to the same stage on her own terms. Agbani Darego. Agbani Darego was only 18 when she carried Nigeria onto the Miss World stage in 2001. On November 16th at Sun City, South Africa, she was crowned Miss World 2001, becoming the first Nigerian and the first Black African woman to win the title. Her rise that year had been remarkably fast. Darego first won Most Beautiful Girl in Nigeria 2001, then represented the country internationally. Her Miss World victory came against a field of 93 contestants and instantly made her one of the most recognizable African beauty queens of her generation. Previous African winners had come from South Africa and Egypt, but Darego's coronation marked the first time a native Black African woman stood at the center of the Miss World stage wearing its crown. Can you imagine being 18 years old, hearing Nigeria announced as the winner, and realizing that millions of people were watching you break a barrier? No Black African woman had broken before. The reaction in Nigeria was enormous. Darego returned home as a national celebrity, and her victory also opened international opportunities beyond pageantry. She later worked in fashion modeling for major designers and brands including Christian Dior, Oscar de la Renta, Ralph Lauren, and L'Oreal. Years later, her 2001 win remains one of Nigeria's defining moments in international pageant history. Miss World itself still describes Darego's victory as a historic first for Nigeria and sub-Saharan Africa. Carole Gist. Carole Gist reached the Miss USA stage with a life story far removed from the glamour surrounding the crown. The Detroit native later revealed that during high school she sometimes slept in her car or stayed with friends while dealing with instability at home. She kept her grades up, earned a college scholarship, and eventually entered pageantry after being inspired by a previous Miss Michigan USA. Everything changed on March 2, 1990 in Wichita, Kansas. Representing Michigan, the 20-year-old Gist was crowned Miss USA 1990, becoming the first Black woman in the competition's history to win the national title. She was also the first contestant from Michigan ever to take the Miss USA crown. What would it feel like to walk onto a stage where no Black woman had ever won and leave wearing the crown? Gist's breakthrough did not end there. Only weeks later, she represented the United States at Miss Universe 1990 in Los Angeles. She advanced all the way to the final 2 and finished as first runner-up behind Norway's Mona Gruth, coming remarkably close to capturing a second international crown. Her victory arrived 7 years after Vanessa Williams became the first Black Miss America, extending a visible change in American pageantry. For young Black contestants watching in 1990, Gist's crowning provided something unmistakable. A woman from Detroit, once struggling simply to find somewhere to sleep, had reached the top of Miss USA. Decades later, the photograph of Gist smiling beneath that crown still records the night another racial barrier in American beauty competitions finally fell. Zozibini Tunzi. Zozibini Tunzi arrived at Miss Universe 2019, representing South Africa, with a look that immediately challenged familiar pageant conventions. On December 8, 2019, at Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta, she won the crown, becoming the third South African Miss Universe and the first Black South African woman to hold the title. Only 4 months earlier, Tunzi had been crowned Miss South Africa. One of the most striking elements of her international appearance was her short, natural hair. She later revealed that people had suggested wigs or weaves, but she refused to reshape herself around an expected Miss Universe image. Her decision drew particular attention because Black women's natural hair had rarely been presented so prominently on the pageant's biggest stage. How powerful must that coronation have felt to girls who had rarely seen their skin tone and natural hair celebrated on a stage watched around the world. Tunzi reinforced that message during the final round. Asked what young girls should be taught, she centered her answer on leadership, arguing that women and girls deserve to occupy spaces where important decisions were made. Her final statement also addressed growing up in a world where women with her complexion and hair were seldom treated as the beauty ideal. The timing made the victory even more remarkable. Tunzi joined Cheslie Kryst, Kaliegh Garris, and Nia Franklin, meaning that Miss Universe, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and Miss America were simultaneously held by black women for the first time. Her reign ultimately lasted 525 days, the longest in Miss Universe history after the following competition was delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Mpule Kwelagobe. Mpule Kwelagobe arrived at Miss Universe 1999 carrying a sash few viewers had ever seen on that stage, Botswana. At only 19, she was the country's first ever Miss Universe contestant. Even more remarkably, 2 years earlier, she had competed at Miss World 1997 without placing. Her return to international pageantry would end very differently. On May 26, 1999, in Chaguaramas, Trinidad and Tobago, Kwelagobe advanced through the competition and reached the final alongside Miriam Quiambao of the Philippines and Diana Noguera of Spain. When her name was announced as Miss Universe 1999, her stunned reaction became one of the night's unforgettable images. Botswana had entered the competition for the first time and immediately produced its winner. Kwelagobe also became the first Black African woman to win Miss Universe. Can you imagine representing a country that had never entered Miss Universe before then, returning home with the crown on your very first attempt? The victory carried particular weight because African women, especially Black African women, had rarely been represented at the very top of international pageantry. Kwelagobe suddenly became one of Botswana's most recognizable faces worldwide. She also refused to let the crown become the end of her story. During her reign, Kwelagobe began speaking publicly about HIV/AIDS prevention, an urgent issue in Botswana. In 2000, the United Nations Population Fund appointed her a Goodwill Ambassador with a particular focus on young people and HIV/AIDS prevention. For Botswana, the shock was not simply that Kwelagobe won. A nation making its Miss Universe debut had sent a 19-year-old newcomer onto the world stage and watched her leave as queen. Chelsi Smith. Chelsi Smith was 21 when she entered 1995, carrying both the Miss Texas USA crown and a determination to speak openly about her biracial background. Born to a Black father and white mother, Smith became the first African-American woman to win Miss Texas USA, then captured Miss USA, becoming the third Black woman to hold that national title. Only months later, Smith traveled to Windhoek, Namibia for Miss Universe 1995. On May 12th, she defeated contestants from around the world and became Miss Universe, making her the first American woman to win the international crown since Sean Weatherly in 1980. She was also the first and remains the only Texan to win both Miss USA and Miss Universe. Can you imagine winning Miss Texas USA, Miss USA, and Miss Universe in the same year while representing a racial identity that pageants had rarely placed at center stage? Smith did not hide that part of herself. During her rise through Texas pageantry, she spoke proudly about her mixed heritage and expressed a desire to confront racism, giving her victories significance beyond gowns and crowns. After her reign, she moved into modeling, acting, television, and music. Smith died from liver cancer in 2018 at only 45. Her place in pageant history has continued to be honored in 2025. The Miss USA organization renamed its Miss Congeniality honor the Chelsi Smith Congeniality Award, preserving the name of a woman whose extraordinary 1995 run remains unmatched in Texas pageant history. Leila Lopes. Leila Lopes arrived at Miss Universe 2011 as a 25-year-old business student from Benguela, representing Angola, on one of pageantry's biggest stages. On September 12th in Sao Paulo, Brazil, she faced 88 other contestants, and by the end of the night, Angola had its first Miss Universe. Lopes steadily advanced from the semi-finalists into the final five, alongside contestants from Ukraine, Brazil, the Philippines, and China. During the final question, she was asked what physical characteristics she would change about herself. Rather than naming one, Lopes said she was satisfied with how she had been created and emphasized the values and inner beauty she had received from her family. The answer, combined with her calm stage presence, helped carry her to the crown over first runner-up Olesha Stefanko of Ukraine. What must it feel like to stand beside the final contestant? Hear your country's name announced and realize that no woman from Angola has ever experienced that moment before. Her victory was significant well beyond the final stage. Lopes became the first Angolan woman to win Miss Universe and the first African winner since Botswana's Mpule Kwelagobe in 1999. She also spoke openly after the competition about racism, saying such thinking had no place in the 21st century. Lopes quickly used the attention for causes she had already supported, including work involving children, older people, and HIV awareness. For Angola, the image was unforgettable. Leila Lopes standing beneath the lights in Sao Paulo as the Miss Universe crown was placed on her head, giving her country a pageant victory it had never seen before. Toni-Ann Singh. Toni-Ann Singh was 23 when she arrived in London carrying Jamaica's hopes at Miss World 2019. Born in Morant Bay, St. Thomas, and later educated at Florida State University in Women's Studies and Psychology, she had been crowned Miss Jamaica World only 3 months earlier. On December 14, she stepped onto the Miss World stage against 110 other contestants. Singh quickly showed that singing was one of her strongest weapons. She won the talent competition and later performed Whitney Houston's I Have Nothing. But her most personal moment came during the final questioning when she spoke about her mother as the woman who inspired her most. By the end of the night, outgoing Queen Vanessa Ponce de Leon placed the blue crown on Singh's head. Could she have imagined that one victory from a young woman from rural Jamaica would become part of an unprecedented moment in pageant history? Singh became the fourth Jamaican Miss World, following Carole Joan Crawford in 1963, Cindy Breakspear in 1976, and Lisa Hanna in 1993. Her win also completed an extraordinary picture in 2019. Black women simultaneously held 5 prominent pageant crowns: Miss World, Miss Universe, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and Miss America for the first time. Singh immediately made clear that she wanted more than photographs in a crown. Speaking after her victory, she said she wanted to pursue lasting change for women and their children. For Jamaica, the night ended with another world title. For Black pageant history, Toni-Ann Singh's crowning became part of a moment that had simply never happened before. Deshauna Barber. Deshauna Barber was a 26-year-old U.S. Army Reserve officer and IT analyst when she represented the District of Columbia at Miss USA 2016. By the end of the June 5 competition in Las Vegas, she had won the crown and made history as the first woman actively serving in the U.S. military to become Miss USA. Barber's military background was not a pageant talking point. She joined the Army Reserve at 17, was commissioned as a quartermaster officer in 2011, and served as a logistics commander with the 988th Quartermaster Detachment. Her father was a retired Army Master Sergeant, and military service ran through her family. What happens when a woman trained to command soldiers walks onto a beauty pageant stage where people may expect a different kind of strength? That contrast became the defining moment of her final interview. Asked about the Pentagon opening combat positions to women, Barber answered from experience, stressing that women were just as capable of toughness, leadership, and dedication as men. The response drew applause. Her reign also gave her a platform for issues tied to military life. Barber spoke about PTSD treatment and suicide prevention among service members and veterans, telling an Army audience that she wanted to move the conversation beyond lipstick and the red carpets. She represented the United States at Miss Universe 2016 in Manila, reaching the top 9. Her victory put a Black Army officer in the spotlight. Nia Franklin. Nia Franklin did not arrive at Miss America as a conventional beauty pageant contestant. The Winston-Salem, North Carolina native was a classically trained singer and composer with a bachelor's degree in music composition from East Carolina University and a master's from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. After moving to New York through a fellowship at Lincoln Center Education, she entered pageantry and became Miss New York 2018. On September 9, 2018, Franklin competed for the Miss America 2019 crown in Atlantic City. Her timing placed her in the middle of one of the biggest changes in the competition's history. For the first time since Miss America began in 1921, there was no swimsuit round. Instead, contestants were given more opportunity to speak about their achievements, goals, and social impact work. Franklin made her strongest impression through music performing Quando Mon Va from Puccini's La Bohème. When the final result was announced, Miss New York had become Miss America 2019. Could you imagine winning one of America's oldest pageants in the very year its most famous tradition was completely removed? Her victory soon became part of an even bigger moment. During 2019, Franklin, Cheslie Kryst, Kaliegh Garris, and Zozibini Tunzi simultaneously held the Miss America, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA, and Miss Universe titles, the first time all four major crowns were held by Black women. Franklin used her reign to promote arts education, traveling nationwide and working with organizations including the New York Philharmonic. Her crown therefore arrived during two changes happening at once. Miss America was redefining what contestants would be judged on, while Black women were occupying pageant stages in numbers the industry had never witnessed before. Cheslie Kryst. Cheslie Kryst was an attorney, television correspondent, and beauty queen from North Carolina who became Miss USA 2019. She was 28 when she won the national crown on May 2, 2019, making her the oldest Miss USA winner at that time. Kryst stood out long before the crown was placed on her head. She held both a law degree and an MBA from Wake Forest University and worked as a civil litigation attorney licensed in North Carolina and South Carolina. Away from pageants, she also performed pro bono legal work for prisoners serving lengthy sentences for low-level drug offenses. How many beauty queens could walk off a pageant stage and return to work fighting real cases for people whose freedom was at stake? Her victory also arrived during an extraordinary moment for Black women in American pageantry. Kryst joined Nia Franklin, then Miss America, and Kaliegh Garris, Miss Teen USA, making 2019 the first time those three major U.S. crowns were simultaneously held by Black women. Later that year, Zozibini Tunzi won Miss Universe, creating an unprecedented sweep of four major titles by Black women. Kryst herself represented the United States at Miss Universe 2019 and reached the top 10. After her reign, Kryst became a correspondent for Extra and earned daytime Emmy recognition with the program. Her life ended tragically in January 2022 at just 30 years old. Her death stunned the pageant and entertainment communities, but her 2019 victory remains closely tied to one of the most historic years Black women ever had in international pageantry. Kaliegh Garris. Kaliegh Garris was only 18 when she stepped onto the Miss Teen USA stage in 2019, but one detail immediately separated her from the polished pageant image audiences had grown accustomed to. The Connecticut teenager chose to compete with her natural curls, refusing to straighten her hair or hide its texture simply to match traditional beauty standards. On April 28, 2019, at the Grand Sierra Resort in Reno, Nevada, Garris reached the final alongside Miss North Dakota Caitlin Vogel. When Connecticut was announced as the winner, Garris covered her face in disbelief before crying and jumping with excitement. The crown was placed directly over the curls she had prepared herself the night before. She became Miss Teen USA 2019 and only the second Connecticut contestant ever to win the national title. Would the moment have carried the same power if Garris had listened to the people who suggested changing the hair that made her feel most like herself? Garris later explained that she felt more confident wearing her natural hair, even though she had encountered people who questioned that decision. Her victory quickly attracted attention far beyond pageant circles because young Black girls could see a major crown being placed over visibly natural Afro-textured curls. Her story went beyond appearance. Garris had founded We Are People, first an initiative inspired by her older sister, who has multiple disabilities, encouraging respectful language toward people with disabilities. Weeks after Garris won, Cheslie Kryst captured Miss USA, while Nia Franklin already held Miss America. For the first time, Miss Teen USA, and Miss America were simultaneously black women. Garris had won a crown, but the image remembered around the world was just as important. She had done it looking exactly the way she wanted to look. Crystle Stewart. Crystle Stewart was a Texas model and entrepreneur who became Miss USA 2008. Her victory in Las Vegas on April 11th made her the 9th woman from Texas to win Miss USA and placed another black woman at the center of one of America's biggest beauty competitions. What made Stewart's journey unusual was how long she had fought for that moment. She competed repeatedly for Miss Texas USA, reaching the semifinals and runner-up positions before finally winning the state crown on her 5th attempt. She became only the 2nd African-American woman to win Miss Texas USA following Chelsi Smith. After years of trying to reach the top, how would you react if one unexpected step suddenly went wrong in front of millions of viewers? That happened at Miss Universe 2008 in Nha Trang, Vietnam. Stewart reached the top 10, but during the evening gown competition, she slipped and fell on stage. It was especially startling because Miss USA Rachel Smith had fallen during the same portion of Miss Universe just 1 year earlier. Instead of freezing or leaving embarrassed, Stewart stood up, smiled, and began clapping, encouraging the audience to applaud with her. She ultimately finished 8th. The fall became one of the most replayed moments of that year's competition, but Stewart refused to let it define her as a failure. Weeks later, she publicly discussed the experience as an example of getting back up after life knocks you down. For Stewart, the unforgettable moment was not falling, it was how quickly she recovered. Wendy Fitzwilliam. Wendy Fitzwilliam entered Miss Universe 1998, carrying the hopes of Trinidad and Tobago. Born in Diego Martin and trained in law, she had already built a modeling career before winning the national title that sent her to Honolulu, Hawaii for the international competition. On May 12, 1998, Fitzwilliam competed against 80 other women. She moved steadily through the preliminary rounds and eventually reached the final 3 alongside Venezuela's Veruska Ramirez and Puerto Rico's Joyce Giraud. When Trinidad and Tobago was announced as the winner, Fitzwilliam became Miss Universe 1998 and the 2nd woman from her country to win the crown, following Janelle Commissiong in 1977. Then you imagine hearing your country's name called while millions of people around the world are watching you realize that you have just become Miss Universe. The victory made Fitzwilliam one of the most recognizable Caribbean women of the late 1990s, but she did not limit her reign to appearances and photo shoots. She became involved in HIV/AIDS awareness and later worked with the United Nations Population Fund as a goodwill ambassador, speaking about reproductive health prevention and the challenges facing young people in the Caribbean. Her reign ended in another memorable moment. In 1999, Miss Universe was held in Trinidad and Tobago, giving Fitzwilliam the rare opportunity to surrender her crown in her own country. The woman she crowned was Botswana's Mpule Kwelagobe. For Fitzwilliam, those 12 months connected 2 historic nights, first standing beneath the Miss Universe crown herself, then returning home and placing it on another black woman whose victory would make history for Africa. Kenya Moore. Kenya Moore was a 22-year-old Wayne State University student and model from Detroit when she entered Miss USA 1993 as Miss Michigan USA. On February 19, 1993, she won the national crown in Wichita, Kansas, becoming only the 2nd black woman in Miss USA history to take the title 3 years after Carole Gist. That victory mattered because black women were still rarely seen winning America's biggest beauty competitions. Moore had begun modeling as a teenager, but Miss USA suddenly placed her before an enormous national and international audience. Jet magazine soon featured her on its cover under the theme that beauty is within, reflecting how quickly her win became part of a broader conversation about black beauty and representation. What would it mean to watch a young black woman from Detroit take a crown that only one black contestant before her had ever held? Moore then represented the United States at Miss Universe 1993 in Mexico City, where she advanced to the top 6. Although she did not capture the international title, she had already secured a permanent place in American pageant history. Her Miss USA victory also opened the door to a much wider career. Moore later moved into acting, producing entrepreneurship, and reality television, eventually becoming widely known through The Real Housewives of Atlanta. But decades before that television fame, she had already made headlines by helping establish something that had once seemed exceptional: a black woman standing at center stage as Miss USA. 17. Black Beauty Queens. 17 moments that forced the pageant world to rethink who could represent beauty, elegance, and power. But here's the question. Did these women truly change beauty standards forever? Or did the industry simply learn how to appear more inclusive? Some shattered barriers that had stood for decades, while others faced criticism, even after making history. Which queen on this list had the greatest impact, and who do you think was overlooked? Share your opinion below and subscribe to Black Legends Revealed for more forgotten stories behind Black history, fame, and culture.